Welcome everyone to the TELedvisors August 2023 webinar. The title for the webinar today is What Standard is That? I acknowledge the Aranda people of Mabantwe, Alice Springs, the traditional owners of the land that I live, work and learn, and I pay respects to elders past and present. I extend that respect to the Indigenous colleagues that are with us today. So I will move on to introduce our third presenter, who is Sarah Thorneycroft, Director, Digital Education, Education Futures UNE, Australia, talking about institutional TELAS. It represents the first credential of its kind in the sector, allowing institutions to gain sector recognised assurance as a provider of quality online learning. The program is a longitudinal engagement with 3 components that can be undertaken independently or integrated with institutional initiatives such as LMS transition or digital uplift. There's an initiation phase, an assessment phase, and a capability building phase. The pilot at UNE will run for approximately 18 months and align with UNE's Project Uplift initiative, and ASCILITE and UNE will be sharing the progress of this pilot with the community at the ASCILITE 2023 conference. Over to you, Sarah, for a bit of an update now.
Thanks, Wendy. All right. Everyone see those slides?
Yes, I can see them, thanks.
Excellent. All right, so with apologies to Hans here because I am not going to be walking the talk today. I'm sorry, there's no interactivity. There's just some talking at you for a little bit. But thanks for the introduction, Wendy. And what I'm going to be talking about today. So full disclosure, I did not actually send Wendy a blurb for this presentation. So she's working with the comms copy that we use to communicate this that talks about the what. But today I'm going to be kind of unpacking a bit of the how and why the institutional TELAS program came about. Which I think is a really nice segue from Don because he did mention scale and working at scale, and that is one of the kind of wicked problems that we wrangle with working in the learning and teaching space in higher education. So I feel like there was probably a terrible joke here that I just did not manage to make around, president and executive and a couple of directors walk into a bar. So I'll let you fill in the blanks with your imagination. But the institutional TELAS program is something that came out of a really what if kind of conversation that started earlier this year. So I will assume that I don't need to explain the TELAS standards framework to the current audience present. But notably, the TELAS framework is designed to evaluate and set standards for the quality of online learning at the learning package level. So individual units or courses or programs, depending on what language your institution uses. And that's it's a formal accreditation program that ASCILITE offers as a fee-for-service evaluation program, which is fabulous and needed. But as people who, in the leadership space, we work at the institutional level and have to think across and work with scale a lot. As Steve and I, so Steve Warburton used to work at UNE, and we were working together quite closely on Project Uplift. So UNE is undergoing an LMS transition project with an uplift work stream rather than a lift and shift transition approach. And as we were developing our own frameworks and evaluation instruments for that uplift program and drawing heavily on the TELAS standards as we did so, we started thinking, what would it look like if we move beyond the individual level and accrediting individual people, individual groups, and thought about accrediting institutions? What would it mean to accredit an institution against the TELAS framework? And so that's where the conversation started. We got in touch with Chris and Elaine and had that what if conversation and started working together from there to develop the program that will become the answer to that question. Now, a really bad answer to that question is we send 1,200 individual units to ASCILITE to evaluate through their existing TELAS evaluation process. So we needed to think differently about what that kind of program would look like. And along with scale, aside from some of the things that we are used to wrangling with around, engagement and impact and uptake, there are a lot of complex factors. I started trying to make, Venn diagrams or pyramid diagrams for this, and I just realized it was not going to work because institutions are complex organizational contexts, and there are a lot of moving interdependent parts that all impact each other and need to be considered. So when thinking about assuring an institution against a standards framework, it's more than just the individual, it's more than just the sum of individual, the course unit program delivery. There's another dimension that to think about, which includes things like working at the institutional level. So there are things like when you are developing the LMS template, a theme, for instance, there's a lot of components of the standards framework that are met that way. You don't need to assess them in every single unit necessarily, because you are building them into the design of the template. And we've seen some really good examples from Dom and Scott around institutional frameworks that exist, and all of the contextual bits and pieces where we're taking something developed in a general sector context, but need to have that institutional context built into it. Part of that as well is the operational, might not be the best word, but the aspect of how we do things in the organisation that actually has relationship with quality. And that might look like policy, it might look like process. So we saw Scott had the course readiness form, I think, that he showed. And then Dom talked about the experience of the quality review process. And then capability building is another important piece. We certainly didn't want to create a situation where it's a, pop in, do a review, pop out, and that's as much engagement with TELAS. And the idea of the quality, it needs to be deeper than that. So there needs to be an institutional capability build component that relates to how everybody across the institution thinks about and understands and engages with learning and teaching quality. And then there's the contextual pieces of the really high level kind of a strategy, regulation, sector context piece, which is kind of the why. Why would we care about doing this in the first place? Why would an institution want to pursue an accreditation against a quality standards framework? And a lot of the answers to that really big picture why are in institutional strategy, are in our regulatory environment. They're in how we engage with the with the as a business in a market, I know that framing makes some people very itchy, but that's the reality of the context that we operate in. And so these are all pieces that need to be factored in. And as we've started the initial design of the program and then have kicked off and started working more specifically with Chris and Elaine, we've encountered some things that we need to really wrangle with as we work through the design of the institutional program around if we're saying that an institution is accredited against TELA standards, does that mean literally every single unit meets every single standard at every single point in time, or does it mean something else? And if it means something else, where is the assurance piece? What's assured by whom and where and how and why? And does assurance look like we have processes in place to continually enhance this, or does it look like we have big sticks for compliance? Anyone who knows me knows that the second answer is not the answer to the question from my point of view. And so it's all of that piece really unpacking what it means to engage with quality standards at an institutional level rather than an individual level. And so to do this, because fundamentally Chris and Elaine and Steve and I are all learning and teaching professionals, we're all leaders in higher education and not product development professionals or things like that. And so we really need to pilot and iterate. We need to design the program as we go. And so UNE has engaged ASCILITE formally to do this, and it will line up with our project Uplift. That's our LMS transition and quality uplift project. And that's really a chance for us to iterate the design, because as we're working with it, we'll encounter things that we need to be thinking about and that need to be designed in the program, so that this is something that other institutions can then work with, and they know the places where the institutional contextualizing and designing for the institution comes in, and the places where we have the assurance pieces and where we need to articulate things, all that kind of thing. And there's procedural stuff too, again, because ASCILITE does not, their program isn't designed to evaluate 1,200 learning packages in any kind of time frame. So it's just thinking through the logistics and things like sampling rates and all of those kind of things. So it's a real work in progress. And watch this space for ASCILITE this year. I think the blurb might have said we will be presenting. We would love to, but asterisk, the confirmation of presentation acceptance hasn't come out yet, I think, for the most part. So hopefully we will be able to talk about this more comprehensively at the conference. That's it from me.
Thanks so much, Sarah. That was a great insight into both, where you're up to and the process behind it. So please show your appreciation to Sarah. We do have a question and answer time available now for all three presenters. And Sarah, I'll just start with a question or a comment from Kate for you. She says, in the COG diagram, I notice operational listed there, and how much might this be informed by an overlap with the work that a code does around institutional digital readiness and digital maturity? So she's thinking about the code threshold standards and the self-assessment tool.
Okay.
Has that come up in your conversations?
I mean, not specifically, but tangentially, those are kind of the spaces that we're having to think in. But the operational things specifically, just to give a concrete example, one of the things we talked about was you know, some of the TELAS standards are built into the template and theme, and then those are the spaces that unit coordinators teach in. But of course, unit coordinators do and should have autonomy over how they design and deliver their teaching. But that also means that they might then make choices after the fact that do not align with the TELAS standards framework. And so thinking in terms of processes of how the assurance piece might come into that. So there might be a role there for the quality monitoring processes that you have internally to the institution. So if you have course and unit review or those type of quality review processes internally as a regular practice, is that the avenue where we then pick those up to make sure that overall we are still working towards that alignment with the TELAS framework, rather than thinking, well, we need to go in and like get out of big sticks every time somebody does magenta font. So it was more thinking about what are our institutional processes to ensure alignment over time, rather than I think your question was a little more around the capability piece, around individual capability around learning quality. I'm not sure if that answers the question very well, but that's kind of the nature of the conversation at that level.
Thanks, Sarah. That gives a bit more context around where that word phrasing operational comes from. Just noting in the chat that Dom has shared some of the standards there. So you should be able to see that. And if there's no other questions, we will finish up a little bit early to enable people to get to their next appointments. So once again, thank you very much for the 3 presenters today. As you can see,
Wendy, I was just like, I can see a question in the chat.
Yeah, go for it.
Do you want to like? Okay, I can jump in and answer it.
From
or if you
Anthony,
still want to finish up. Yes. So the question is there any intention to make changes to the TELAS instrument itself to help it scale? So absolutely. So that's when I would say it was going to be a bad idea to evaluate 1,200 units 1-for-1 against TELAS in its current form. So part of the initiation phase is to contextualize the TELAS instrument to what you need it to do. That might look different for different institutions. But 2 things that we're doing are cross-referencing with our evaluation instrument, our internal evaluation instrument that references TELAS. But another big one is, TELAS refers to them as the admin elements, which are the ones that often relate to the system level, the theme and template level. And so we are stripping those out to create a system evaluation. So the MyLearn will be the name of the new LMS, and MyLearn will be evaluated against the TELAS admin elements, because those pieces don't need to be done in every single unit. So there are those kind of changes that we're building in, so it's not a one-to-one use of the framework in its unchanged form.
Thank you. There's a question for Scott. Scott, I don't know if you want to just clarify your answer on the microphone. The question was about the rollover process. Amy said it sounds like the courses are rolled over in the background by the LD team, then the academic completes the readiness form. Can you clarify if this process is correct?
Yeah, so each year we archive the current course with all the students' work and all the enrolments. So that's put into an archive section.
Just pull your microphone down slightly.
Sorry, it's archived into the archive section of our LMS, and we make a copy for the new semester or the new year, a new fresh copy, and it's hidden until the that form is completed. We have control over the access. We don't give the staff the hide show access.
So Tanya extends that and says she would like to know more about the timeframes and how long it has taken for the rollout and adoption of that sort of lockdown until you tick the box process.
Yeah. So that's very depending on how onto it the tutor or the lecturer is. That could be last minute. You know, like if they're prepared and a good tutor, a good lecturer, then they'll do that, you know, late in the year after the course finishes and ready for the next year, if you know what I mean. But some tutors and lecturers are a bit slack and they'll leave it to the last minute. So sometimes it can be quite rushed and can be a problem. But we put out warnings to people to get those things ready before the semester starts.
I know I worked with a similar process at Charles Darwin University of having that online checklist being a requirement. And in some cases, it would open up that conversation, as you were saying, Dom, about having the two people in the room. It would, if the checklist couldn't be completed for some reason, then they would seek out help to complete that part of the checklist.
Yeah, and I'd also clarify, we're totally in the same way, working the same way that Dom talked about. It's very much a collaborative process. All those stages, right from the course development right through to the rollover, is always done in collaboration as much as possible.
Great, thanks very much. And thank you, Sarah. You've put some reference links in there. We can share those in the Teams area as well. And there's a further comment there for you, Scott, in the chat.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. What's that?
I'm just
SharePoint flows. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm going to go back to Sarah just for a short comment on aligning the institutional TELAS with a Uplift program. Why align it that way? Like, isn't one lot of work enough to do just the LMS change or the Uplift without all the added complexities of an institutional alignment?
I can see what you're asking. And so, yes, in theory, from a staff at UNE perspective, it will look like very much a two birds with one stone process. But one of the important things is this program is to maintain the integrity that ASCILITE has put into the program and the development of the standards and the framework and the evaluation process. And so because the institutional contextualization piece is important, and we're operating the project in a specific way that we need to for UNE, it would not meet the overall assurance goals for UNE staff to be doing that assurance piece. ASCILITE needs to have that purview to bring the rigor of that evaluation process in, not just take our word for it, I guess. So I think that's why, maybe overall it looks like double handling, but it's really that kind of insurance of the integrity and rigor piece as a formal accreditation in the sector rather than working only to our own internal framework. So I think that was an important piece to still have as a core part of the project.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks everyone. And I'm going to stop the recording here.